Hi, I'm the Dreaded Geek. Welcome back. I'm finally going to get round to doing my review of Machina Arcana. Thank you for bearing with me for so long. I've had a great holiday and been out of the country for 10 days and just didn't have time to post this even to record this before I left. So this has been a bigger gap than I usually like to leave between an unboxing and a review. I have played the game a couple times before I went away, and I'm reviewing it after I've come back, so bear with me if I need to search my memory for some of the rules. It's been a little while. I'm not as fresh with this as I usually am when I film these reviews. So I filmed the unboxing of Machina Arcana a little while ago. This was a brand new, is still a fairly new game that has just come out for the Kickstarter backers. And I believe some of them still don't have it, so I've not only managed to get my unboxing out in time for those people, but now they'll get a review as well. Not that it helps them much, they've already bought it. So you're getting an insight into how I like to package my games now, because you've seen this one being unboxed and realized how much organization I've added to the components. So I'm going to put the box a little bit out of the way so that I can access the components and have the space here to set up. The game is played on these map tiles. As the characters explore from map tile to map tile, you extend the map outwards, but never more than in a 2x2 square, and then when your characters are moving on, you recycle the tiles that you're leaving behind. So although there's a fairly limited number of actual tiles, most of them are two-sided. Meaning that there's quite a lot of variability and reuse to these tiles that you can stretch out as you play without starting to repeat rooms. I'm just going to use one of the tiles as I talk through how the game is played, and then talk about my opinions of it. So the players are represented on the board by cardboard standees. In today's gaming world, it seemed like an odd decision not to go with miniatures. However, I did like the effect that had of keeping the cost and the weight of the box down quite substantially. Each character is also represented by a card. The card goes with a standee and describes certain of the stats and base attacks and things like that the character has, as well as on the back the flavor text, the backstory for that character. The backstories were really interesting and added to my enjoyment of the game anyway. Each player has a explorer card that they put explorer tile that they put their character's card on, like so. And then they track their current energy, stamina, and health. on these 3 tracks to the right with these small tokens. The basic flow of the game, each hero in turn uses their 6 actions. Technically each hero has its own number of actions, but I haven't yet seen a hero co-op who has anything other than 6. So the character uses their 6 actions to do various things around the board. Obviously move is one of them. Attacks take different numbers of action points. And then there are some special abilities and special actions that can be used on certain points on the board, which I'll get to some of those in a little while. This is a fairly complex and large game in terms of what it covers and what it does, so there is no way I will be able to cover every rule in this game. I'm going to try to give a basic feel for how the gameplay works, but this is not by any means a rules walkthrough. These 2 tokens here track the current monster level and threat level, and the horror level and something else of the current scenario. During each turn, one player will roll a d10 against the scenario's horror level, and if they fail that roll, they may need to spawn more monsters onto the board, or increase the current monster threat level, or follow some other actions on the current scenario cards. Most attacks are carried out with these modified D3s. There are light and heavy attacks, and an attack will usually roll a number of one or the other, and sometimes a mixture of both, in order to deal damage to the monsters or from the monsters to the heroes. The total number that is rolled on these dice, you'll see that the distribution of numbers is slightly different. The heavy attack dice has 1 blank face, 2 1s, 2 2s and a 3, whereas the light attack die has also 1 blank face, but 3 1s, 2 2s and no 3. So you roll your handful of dice, you total up that was a horrible attack for that roll, you total up the numbers shown on the dice, in this case just 2, and compare it to the defensive stat of the target. For a physical attack, the defensive stat is armor, and for a magical attack, the defensive stat is willpower. And if you defeat that number, you take 1 damage. There's very few things that can do multiple points of damage in this game, but it's still a very lethal system. Heroes have 5 hit points, and it can take only a turn or 2 to lose them if you're horribly unlucky or if you put yourself in a bad situation. Monsters usually only have 1 or 2 hit points, and it can still be very difficult to kill them. As you've seen, with 1 light and 2 heavy, which is a fairly big attack in this game, it's possible to roll just 2, and not many of the monsters will be hurt with a physical attack roll of 2. So the monsters are also represented on the game board with standees, and each monster card, similarly to the hero cards, describes the attacks and movement points that the monsters have available to them. The decision process for monsters is very easy. They go after the closest hero. If there's multiple tied heroes for closeness, there's a system of tiebreakers to decide which hero to go after. Once that decision has been made, if they can use the first attack on their card, they will. If they can't, they'll try to use the second attack on their card. If they can't, they'll try to use, if they have one, a third attack on their card. If they have no more attacks on their card, they will move one square closer. Then they'll try to attack again. And that will be repeated for every movement point that the monster has. Most of the monsters have a similar number of movement points to the heroes, so running away is very seldom an option. You really need to stand and fight, and fighting is usually a losing proposition in this game. So it captures the feel of the typical Cthulhuoid horror game really well in that respect. Running will prolong your life, but not indefinitely, and fighting is a sure way to die. I would usually set up and play through at least one turn of a game in a review. A turn of this game can take so long that I just don't feel that's feasible. So I'm going to talk through all the components of the game and how they impact the gameplay instead. This card is used to track the progress of the story that you're telling. There's a deck of cards, of objective cards here. Every time you complete an objective, you flip one over and get a new one from that deck, and you get through the deck to complete the story. You can play with a randomized set of objectives, but the game comes with a handful of stories that you can tell by putting a set number of a specific set of cards on that tile to start with. Each objective card has its own monster rating and horror rating for the time that it's exposed, for the time that it's the current objective. And every turn of the game you roll against the horror rating to see whether you need to spawn new monsters or increase the threat rating or do various other things, as I mentioned earlier. When you spawn monsters, they spawn on these monster spawn points, the Cthulhuoid squid-like icons. And then those monsters will start to act, as I described earlier, hunting down and killing the heroes. Or hopefully being killed by the heroes. The heroes, in the meantime, once they get onto a square, want to deactivate the monster spawn points. They want to go to these refresh points to regain some hit points, ideally, or gain some energy. They want to go to these treasure points and the treasure chests and the workbench in order to gain items into their inventory that give them stronger attacks or higher defense against the monsters. And then they want to head to the quest objective squares, which are detailed on the cards, and spend a set number of action points in order to trigger the end of that quest objective. All of this while being chased by monsters out of your worst nightmares that are trying to kill you and are resistant to most of the attacks you can deal on them. It is, as I said earlier, a typical Cthulhuoid horror game. Survival is not for the fittest, it's for the insane. And the monsters are always going to be stronger than you are and really never stop coming unless you find a dark corner to hide in and just never go onto a new map square. But that doesn't exactly get you to winning the game either. I like my big epic games. I've said it before, I'm sure I will say it again in doing these reviews. I love these games where you're marching through tile after tile of hazards and monsters, and the rules are complex and cover realistic aspects of the game setting. That's my kind of game. So I was expecting to love this game, and I do. It's complicated, it's fun, it's everything I like in a big game. What surprised me was that my wife enjoys this game too. She does not like big epic games. She finds them confusing and too much like hard work, and she wants to sit down and have fun with a more casual game. Yet she loved this game as well. It was a surprise to me, a very pleasant surprise, because we now have a game of my favorite genre that I can play with her instead of having to find other people to play them with. But I have to say in my review that I can honestly recommend this game for just about anybody. I certainly wouldn't recommend it to play with kids. It has a very strong horror theme, and it's a very violent game with some very nasty, sordid bits and pieces and character backgrounds, and it's not a kid-friendly game by any means. But for just about anybody else, and even for people with kids who can play without their kids, I highly recommend this game. And that has been a review of Machina Arcana. And I am the Dreaded Geek. Thanks for watching.